As ethnic studies majors and as you all are preparing for graduation this spring, what advice would you give to future ethnic studies students?
My name's Esteban. I think it's really important to engage like with your peers in your ethnic studies classes. Like it's just super important to have like that community learning and just being able to like talk through the material and like, oh, what did you think about this? And like really group and like sharing is huge in like our way of learning. And like professors have been just absolutely amazing. Like without the professors and the staff and everybody we have in ethnic studies, like I probably wouldn't be majoring in ethnic studies. But it makes it like that much better, you know, that we have professors we can come to, we can email, we can just have like a dialogue about the stuff that we're learning. Like that has completely changed like the way how I see material, how I see learning. Like it's been just super helpful.
And my name is Michelle. I agree with Esteban. Me and Esteban actually took a year and a half of classes together, which was 3 courses, and they were back to back. So having Esteban there, one, you do get to build this knit community, and that's awesome to have within ethnic studies, especially since it's really small. You really get to have that connection and meet new people. But I think also, like he was saying, it's being able to have that dialogue and talking through that material, because it does get hard sometimes. So having people there that can help each other out, that would be my advice too, as well as with professors. Ask questions, they don't bite. And that was me for the longest time. I had a professor and I admired him so much, but it was always talking to him that was very difficult for me. But I think just kind of knowing that, you know, we're all people and it shouldn't be intimidating, and that will really help you succeed within grades. If you have questions, ask, because that's going to clarify a lot.
My name is Chelsea, and one advice that I would give to future ethnic studies majors and minors would be to educate yourself first on an issue that you're not familiar with. You touch on a lot about this community learning, and that's an important piece after the individual has self-learned. Once you do your own research, you're able to have a very engaged dialogue with other folks too, who might not be ethnic studies majors or minors, and they could just be folks that you talk in public transportation, for example, or maybe one of your cousins, right? But self-learning is important, educating yourself first, and then applying that knowledge to other conversations too, where folks who have expertise in those conversations too. I feel like you'll feel more confident in issues that you're going to talk about, but also you're going to apply what you learned personally to other subjects as well. Like, for example, I'm a public health major, so I'm able to apply what I've learned personally through ethnic studies with my ethnic studies folks, but also to my public health folks as well.
Yeah, so kind of just jumping off what Chelsea said, I think it's really important to like be vulnerable as a student, where you're coming into a major that you might have never heard of. You don't really know about certain groups we study, and then kind of just taking a step back and just appreciating what you don't know. Like this is completely what college is about. Like you're not an expert in all this stuff. Like this is, and it's just soaking in all the information and viewing it from a objective viewpoint, and also like deconstructing things that you've been taught your whole life, right? There's a number of things that we're taught from since we were really little, like to even now in the news we consume, and a number of different things. We have the opportunity, I think, in ethnic studies to really dissect those areas, and I think that's like super cool. And we're lucky that we're able to have this area of study that most people kind of just cruise by, but it's super important and super valuable.
I think something I want to touch up on that too is don't feel intimidated. Like he said, we don't know. We're here to learn, so don't ever feel like you're scared to ask questions or that you might look down, because that was my biggest fear too. Like I'd hear all these classmates and they talk very intellectually, and I'm not that. I don't talk that way. But to me, it was intimidating asking questions or even participating in these discussions because of that reason. But I think it's just learning like to overcome that. It doesn't matter. We're all here to learn, and also you should be able to speak up. And I think that was interesting to me. Once I did, I was able to learn a lot and interact with one another. So for me, that was very, I think, something that I recommend. Just don't shut off.
Yeah. And to add on what you just said, Michelle, is as long as you're not afraid to ask questions, just know that folks are willing to help you understand specific issues or, you know, give you wisdom and knowledge, as long as you're willing to commit and do the work in the future. Like, it's not just a one-stop shop. You're gonna learn this and then shy it away, right? You're gonna apply the knowledge, what you've learned, in other areas where you choose to decide where you're gonna go.
I think naturally in ethnic studies we talk about topics that are uncomfortable to the majority of society. But the importance of being uncomfortable and understanding that it's okay to not be comfortable is exactly how we learn, right? So like in numerous classes that we've taken together, like there's some deep topics that stem from like racism. There's just all across the board, right? And if you are like, I wouldn't say shy, but if you're on the fence about those issues, like it's okay to just be uncomfortable. It's okay to have your feeling, and that's how we learn. So that was super important in the classes we took together. So
oh, I have another one actually. Something else I recommend also is a lot of students get scared when it comes to writing or exams or study habits. You know, those will develop with time, so don't ever feel intimidated that you're not gonna learn or you're not gonna know how to do it. Because for me, my biggest challenge was writing. I was never strong at writing. So every time I'd go into these classes, I'd be like, am I gonna pass? Am I not? So it's just practice makes perfect. And through these classes, that's what I was able to do. Literally for the past 2 years, all I've been doing is writing essays. But that's really helped me just to become a better writer and be more confident. And you also learn tricks and study habits to make your studying faster. So don't ever worry like or feel intimidated that or just feel like you don't know how to do it, because you will learn. It takes time. Or you can also help people, like even us as alumni, you can contact us and we can help you and give you study tips or what we did, because for me that was really helpful. Now when my boyfriend's sister asked me like, how do you do this, it's easier for me to navigate and tell her, oh, okay, do this and that. And so yeah, it's really helpful, and don't ever feel like it's not going to get better, because it will. Also breathe, relax. We're all struggling, and I think that's something that I would always be in college. I'd be like, am I the only one? Am I going nuts? Am I the only one stressed out? But knowing that no, you're not. Everyone else, like, and sometimes I'd walk on campus and I'm like, well, they don't seem as stressed as me, so they're probably not dealing with the same things, but they are. So don't ever feel like you're alone. I think that's, again, having that close-knit community and really talking to peers. And I think that's what through ethnic studies I really liked. We were able to, like, you know, talk to each other when we were stressing out about assignments and just help one another out. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, Chelsea. How has ethnic studies shaped your identity?
So I identify as Indonesian American. And so I took courses within the ethnic studies major, Asian American, contemporary Asian American experiences, as well as the indigenous studies. And I would have to say that both have played into shaping how I understand my Asian American experience, unpacking and relearning a lot of past experience, but also present as well. But Indigenous studies has allowed me to understand more of my indigenous roots in terms of like language and cultural norms and values. Because after talking with my parents, I learned that there are tribes within our culture group, and I didn't even know that until I like took an Indigenous studies course, which was fascinating because that allowed me to have a extended conversation with my parents to learn more about my indigenous roots.
Have you taught or guided your family towards thoughtful and insightful dialogue regarding ethnic studies topics?
Yes, most definitely. I would have to say I've had more conversations with my dad about this, just because they do work with diverse groups, cultural groups, but with my dad, he tends to believe like the news a lot. So I always try to educate and just like bring him a different perspective to learn information or historical context from the actual cultural group instead of the news, which could tweak and much like change certain information to make you think that a lie may be a truth, right? And I also try to educate him on like implicit biases, because there are those internal things that we do have about certain groups, and that's not a conversation that we have a lot, but I am engaging more in terms of that. Mm-hmm.
What was or is your favorite topic within ethnic studies? Within your ethnic studies degree?
My favorite topic within my ethnic studies degree would have to be the health, ethnicity, and social justice course, which is cross-listed with ethnic studies and public health majors. With this course, I really applied my personal experiences within the course because I do have to deal a lot with translating certain words and terminology, medical terminology between the doctor or nurse with my mom or dad. English is not their first language, and so translating that is important to them, but also to me to make sure that the information is said in the right way. But with the health, ethnicity, social justice course, there's a lot of like what we learn in that course is more towards examples of how implicit bias plays within relationship between nurse and patient or doctor and patient. And when students read those articles, journal articles, and different stories and narratives, it makes me apply it to my own personal experience. And so I think that's why it impacted me a lot, just because if it touches on the personal level, I'm already interested in learning more about that as well.
So Michelle, does your family understand why you are studying ethnic studies?
Yes and no. So when I first started studying ethnic studies, my parents were like, what is it? And they didn't know what it was. And even within, like, for them, they both went to school in Mexico, so for them it was different because it's very general. They don't have a lot of topics. So for them it was either like administration or chemistry or just something very general. So when I would say it, they're like, what is that? And I'm like, I told them it's the history of different ethnicities. And still it was like, what? So it was kind of hard to explain them why I wanted to do it, but I think they really understood it when I was like, it's just studying different perspectives, because we do live in a nation that has diverse people. So for me that was just interesting, and I've always liked history. So at first it was kind of hard for them to understand, but they did know it was more about like social issues and just learning more about different ethnicities.
Have you taught or guided your family towards thoughtful and insightful dialogue regarding ethnic studies topics?
Yes and no. I think my parents were both very open-minded, so they're very well versed when it comes to issues, whether it's political or even like when it talks like even kind of like psychological. So I think it's more of how we both teach each other. When I think there's something very interesting, I'll share it with them. And the other day we were talking about politics, and me and my dad just went at it. Not in a bad way, like very neutral. So we understood each other and we had that dialogue. And I think that's interesting where he's open about it versus other parents might be like, what are you talking about? What? So I like that. My parents have been very open. So when it comes to ethnic studies, we do talk about like race, ethnicity, and that's new to them because where they come from, there is racism within Native Americans, but it's very different in the way that it comes across versus here it's like different ethnic groups. So it was different for them, but yeah, I have here it. Okay.
So what was or is your favorite topic within your ethnic studies degree?
My favorite topic within ethnic studies was global media, and I still love it till this day, especially when it comes to beauty standards and the westernized look. And I think it has to do a lot about with like corporations and the way they manipulate media, and also the way we take all this information in. And so for me, I've always liked that, where I feel like we're being constantly manipulated to fit a certain standard. And so for me, it's just interesting to learn those types of topics because it's something that affects everyone, whether we want to think about it or not, like subconsciously or consciously. So for me, it was just interesting hearing just how those topics intermix. Thanks.
Okay, first question. How has ethnic studies broadened your understanding of current social, cultural, or political issues?
So for me, I think what ethnic studies really does is like it allows you to look at things from a different lens, different perspective. It really makes you like become vulnerable, right? You have to look at things from a different point of view, really objectively, and that applies to all those like categories just listed: social, cultural, and political. Like I'm really interested in politics, so diving out of my own personal views and getting a look at like all different policies throughout all the time. It really forces you to just look at everything in a different viewpoint. I think that's helpful in any career and just in life in general. So,
How has ethnic studies shaped your identity?
So for me, taking ethnic study classes, I think are really valuable to anybody. For me as a Mexican American, I'm really proud to be Mexican American, Chicano. So just the fact that we have like Chicano history classes, like that whole topic and just separating, or not separating, but being inclusive, it's nowhere near separating. Being inclusive to different communities, I think is important, and that's really like a part of my identity, who I am and how I portray like myself, so.
How are you implementing ethnic studies in your daily life?
I think that kind of goes back to the first question. So understanding how different groups and different perspectives, I think is helpful in everyday life. Understanding how people see the world and how you have an impact, whether that's as, you know, like as a student, as a coworker, and just any faction of life, really. Just having a broader view and knowledge of other perspectives, I think is helpful. So it's had a big impact.